It's crazy how much a character can change over the course of one film. Rango begins as a complete fraud, making up stories about his heroism just to gain everyone's admiration in Dirt. But somehow, he manages to rattle the infamous Rattlesnake Jake with only 2 words. The look of horror in Jake's eyes says everything. This is the same outlaw who exposed Rango's lies and sent him crawling out of town. So how did a cowardly household pet become an actual hero before the credits started rolling? To understand that, we need to return to the very beginning, when Rango was nothing more than a dramatic chameleon living inside a terrarium with the strangest group of friends imaginable. That's basically Rango's entire life. Before becoming the sheriff of Dirt, this guy didn't even have a real name. He begins the film alone inside a glass terrarium, spending his days performing elaborate scenes for a bunch of inanimate objects. And to his credit, Rango clearly has imagination. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all he has. He has no meaningful relationships or even an identity outside whatever role he's playing. One moment, he's a fearless hero facing impossible danger. Next, he's a tortured romantic delivering emotional monologues to a plastic torso. This guy has played every possible character except himself. And deep down, Rango already knows that. Inside the terrarium, Rango controls everything. He invents the conflict and decides exactly how every story ends. Nothing inside that glass box can genuinely challenge him. So naturally, Rango wants something unexpected to finally push him into a real adventure. Man, the universe really said your wish is my command. When the terrarium shatters, Rango can't control the setting or predict what happens next for the first time in his life. He's stranded in the Mojave Desert, where everything is dangerously hot. After meeting a flattened armadillo who speaks almost entirely in cryptic metaphors, Rango begins crossing the desert. He still narrates his journey and acts like he's the fearless adventurer he always imagined becoming. Then, the desert introduces him to predators that can actually eat him. And suddenly, playing the hero becomes so much harder. Honestly, the only reason he survives is through sheer dumb luck. Still, despite all the screaming and frantic running, Rango keeps moving forward. Eventually, that journey leads him to a small town called Dirt, a place filled with dangerous criminals and absolutely nobody to verify his qualifications. In other words, it's the perfect place for Rango to reinvent himself. And that's how the nameless chameleon becomes Rango. When he finally reaches Dirt, the residents stare at him like they're deciding whether he's stupid or simply worth robbing. So Rango does what he's always done best. He becomes whoever the audience wants him to be. Within seconds, Rango transforms into a hardened Western gunslinger with a deeper voice. He invents impossible shootouts and enough dead brothers to make everyone reconsider asking follow-up questions. And somehow, the townspeople believe every word. Unfortunately, pretending to be fearless becomes much harder when the local hawk arrives looking for lunch. Like the others, Rango immediately screams and runs away. Yet through a ridiculous chain of accidents, luck somehow supports every heroic claim he just made. Mantis, look out! Even Rango looks so confused by what just happened. With a single accidental bullet, he topples the water tower and kills the predator that has terrorized Dirt for years. There was no skill or bravery involved here, but the townspeople only see the mysterious gunslinger standing beside the body. And suddenly, his fictional identity has physical evidence, making everyone believe his stories. And Rango certainly isn't about to correct anyone, especially after the mayor appoints him sheriff.
I'm the one that can see John Cena. I'm the one that knows Victoria's Secret. I'm the one that knows what the dog is doing. I'm that guy. I'm him.
With this badge, Rango finally has a name, admiration, and a clear character to play. The only problem is that Dirt needs someone capable of solving a very real water crisis. So, like most people with power, Rango makes enormous promises without possessing anything remotely resembling a solution. It's bad enough that his poor decisions even help the thieves escape with the town's remaining water, but this guy also leads a posse into the desert to recover it despite having no tracking experience or general understanding of what sheriffs actually do. So basically, Dirt has placed its survival in the hands of a theater kid with excellent improvisational skills. Somehow, Rango survives the mission through quick thinking and blind luck. Until this moment, Rango views the sheriff role as another performance, but he realizes that the people of Dirt genuinely depend on him for hope and the possibility that their town might survive. As Rango spends more time with them, they become people he actually wants to protect, especially Beans. Unlike the others, she doesn't blindly worship Rango but actually questions him, but she also trusts him to protect the land her family has spent generations preserving. Through Beans, Rango finally develops a meaningful relationship with someone whose future depends on his choices, which is something he never had inside the terrarium. And so, Rango finally starts to uncover the truth because the residents need someone willing to fight for them. Unfortunately, false reputations can only survive for so long. And just like that, Rango's immense supply of luck officially runs out. Killing the hawk may have made him look heroic, but it also removed the only predator keeping something far worse away from Dirt. The moment Rattlesnake Jake arrives, the entire tone of the movie changes. Unlike Rango, Jake doesn't need to invent 7 dead brothers before people take him seriously. The sound of his rattle and the Gatling gun attached to his tail are enough to shake everyone in their boots. Jake is everything Rango has spent the movie pretending to be, and he's here to pick apart the lies Rango crafted into his fake identity. Until this moment, Rango survives because nobody directly challenges his legend. Every lucky accident gives the townspeople another reason to believe his stories. Jake, however, sees right through him. And for once, he can't improvise his way out. When Rango first entered Dirt, he had no identity. Now he leaves the town the same way, stripped of the name and reputation he created. After everything he experienced, Rango still can't explain who he really is. Without the sheriff badge, nothing seems to separate him from the nameless chameleon inside the terrarium. So Rango returns to the highway where his journey originally began. This time, however, he crosses without any visible concern for his safety. Somehow, he reaches the other side. Waiting there is the only figure capable of giving him the perspective he needs, the Spirit of the West. Rango expects the spirit to provide some grand epiphany about who he truly is. Instead, the answer's much simpler. This is the moment that completely reframes Rango's identity crisis. He realizes he can't control how his story began or even erase the lies he already told, but he can still decide how it ends. Inside the terrarium, Rango believed conflict would magically reveal his true identity. In reality, conflict only presents a choice. The decision someone makes afterward reveals who they are. So, when Jake exposed him, Rango chose to run away. And now, he faces another decision. He can remain safely outside Dirt, or he can return to the people who now hate him and help them anyway. The decision is made easier for him when he discovers that Dirt's water never disappeared naturally. The mayor has been controlling an emergency valve, deliberately cutting off the supply so desperate residents would sell their land and abandon the town. Suddenly, every part of the mystery fits together. Most importantly, Dirt still needs someone willing to expose the mayor and restore the water. For the first time, Rango has a reason to return that has nothing to do with admiration. The cowardly chameleon finally chooses to stop acting like the hero and actually become one. But unfortunately, that means returning to face Rattlesnake Jake. This decision already separates Rango from the chameleon who first wandered into Dirt. Back then, he created this fearless persona, wanting everyone to believe he was brave. But in reality, he was still a coward at the first sign of trouble. Now, though, he knowingly places himself in danger because Beans in the town still need his help. That is what finally makes him heroic. And this time, Rango doesn't rely entirely on blind luck and actually has a plan. And more importantly, he asks the other desert creatures for help instead of treating them like supporting characters in the Rango show. Together, they redirect the water toward Dirt and lure Jake into position. Of course, the rattlesnake threatens Rango again, expecting the same terrified fraud he drove out of town. Instead, he's shocked to find no sign of him. This confrontation mirrors their first meeting, but so much has changed. Sure, Jake is still the same terrifying gunslinger, and Rango is smaller and weaker. But unlike the previous meeting, when Jake searched Rango's eyes and found nothing, he finally sees something. And for the first time, the infamous rattlesnake Jake looks genuinely rattled. Unfortunately, Rango's plan doesn't go perfectly because the mare traps him and Beans inside the water vault. But even when everything falls apart, Rango improvises with the bullet Jake gave him during their first encounter and uses it to shatter the glass. The same bullet once meant to humiliate Rango ultimately becomes the weapon that saves the town. And that victory completely changes how Jake sees him. The deadliest outlaw in the desert finally recognizes Rango as a worthy opponent. In the end, Rango may not be the legendary gunslinger he claimed to be, but he becomes the sheriff Dirt needed all along. Yes, Rango started out as a phony. His stories, however, weren't completely meaningless. They revealed the person he desperately wanted to become: confident, respected, and brave. Wanting that identity was never enough, though. He had to choose it when the danger became real and nobody believed in him anymore. That's why those two words change everything. They don't magically transform a coward into a hero. They're simply the first words that Rango speaks after finally becoming one.